Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar entitled Smart Digital Signage, How to Use Smart Rules and Live Data Sources to Automate Your Content Management Workflows. I'm Jason Kushner, and I'm the editor of the website Digital Signage Connection, where this webinar recording will be hosted. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for an interactive webinar in which we're going to discuss the benefits of using real-time information to trigger content that will drive audience engagement. This webinar is presented by Navori Labs, and for those of you that don't already know, they're a global software innovator with 22 years experience in delivering premium technologies and large-scale deployment expertise to thousands of customers worldwide. Navori softwares are developed in-house by Navori's own R&D department, supported by the company's team of highly qualified engineers. The company is a world leader dedicated to digital signage and computer vision technologies. So our presenter today is Jordan Feil. Based in Montreal, Canada, Jordan is an experienced digital signage software professional with more than 12 years of industry experience. He's managed and worked in various departments along the way, including technical support, project management, technical account support, and product management for two of the most recognized digital signage software providers in the industry. He joined Navori in 2018 and now holds the position of product manager. So today, Jordan is going to demonstrate the Navori Labs approach to data-driven content automation and also how to easily create smart content workflows driven by live data sources using the Navori QL digital signage platform. Before I hand the floor over to Jordan here, I just want to say that we are recording today's webinar, and it will be hosted on Digital Signage Connection in its entirety if you come in late or would like to share that content with a colleague. And the other thing is all your questions that we have, please post them in the chat bar, and we'll address as many as we can before the end of the hour webinar. That said, take it away, Jordan.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Pleasure to have the opportunity to present today. And thank you to everyone that has come in to join and watch the live webinar and demonstration. Like Jason said, my name is Jordan Feil. I'm a product manager here at Navori. And also, as he said, Navori is among the global leaders in digital signage software globally. And I'm really excited to have this opportunity. So what you can see on the screen here is just a general sort of welcome message to give you a general sense of the types of things we're going to be talking about. Not to worry, this isn't going to be a purely PowerPoint-driven presentation. We're going to be going through a few different slides that I have prepared here today. And as we do so, I'm going to be switching back and forth between the slide deck as well as the actual interface. We'll be doing some live demonstrations as well. So if you're worried that this was just going to be a boring PowerPoint, you are in luck. We're going to do some hands-on stuff as well to keep everybody interested and make sure that you get a sense of exactly what it is we're discussing. So to kick things off, outside of the initial presentation that we have on screen, a very brief agenda of what we're going to be covering today. So as we're doing right now, just welcoming everybody online and on board. And here are some of the questions we're going to be trying to answer and topics we're going to be trying to cover today in the 45 minutes we have together. So first question, why automate your content management workflows? We're going to discuss why you should consider or strongly consider using live data feeds and data sources to drive content decisions. And at the end, we're going to look into and cover a lot of the key use cases where data-driven content automation will provide you with a very big advantage. So I'm going to be trying to moving through these topics as quickly as possible, and of course, switching back and forth between the on-screen PowerPoint deck and the actual Navori CMS, where we're going to be going through building and experiencing some of these live examples, so to speak. So, first question, why automate your content management tasks? So I put some, pretty general talking points up on the screen, but hopefully they'll all be very obvious to you, and you'll probably know what I'm going to say before I'm even going to say it. So the first topic really, or the first point is, automation, of course, is designed to save your employees time, which in turn will lower your operating expenses. You can have potentially, a smaller number of content managers within your organization. And by lowering OpEx, of course, you're increasing the return on investment of both the employees working with your digital signage system, as well as the overall cost of the digital signage system or platform that you are using. So the idea is, we don't want to be necessarily taking jobs away from people, but automation ultimately will save your organization time. I think that goes ultimately without saying. Second point, decrease the possibility and occurrence of user errors. Okay, so one of the big things that scare a lot of folks when talking to their content management teams, and you're publishing content out to thousands and thousands of screens all over the world, the more tasks that your employees or your content managers have to take day to day, adding content, changing playlists, creating new schedules, the more they have to do, the more possibility of error you will encounter. So automation, again, in general, we're looking to save time, and we're looking to give you a more reliable solution ultimately that will prevent and decrease the possibility of user error within your content management system. Third point, increase creativity and productivity. So this is really a byproduct of point number one. So when we're saving your employees time from creating new playlists every single day, rushing into the office to arrange the content for that day or for that 2 days, let's say, the less time they're spending doing, day-to-day content management and content changes for the given day, you're freeing up their time to take on, to be more creative and to be more productive with other elements of their responsibilities. So you may find that once you move to, content automation, you're going to be having folks that will be able to spend more time on actually creating high-quality content rather than scheduling it and testing it and all these other things that will ultimately be taking up their time without using automation within the system. And then finally, improved accountability. So that also ties back to the second point, decreasing the possibility of user error. So ultimately, what you're going to see as we start getting into some examples, when going the automated route, there are far less day-to-day tasks that need to occur. Okay, we're going to be setting up rules in advance. We're going to be dumping media into our rule-driven or automated playlists. And we're ultimately letting the system do the heavy lifting or the dirty work, so to speak. Okay, so rather than having to take, 30 different actions from uploading 10 pieces of media, moving them all into a playlist, scheduling out for the given day, all we're really going to be looking at is creating and modifying a simple set of data-driven rules that will ultimately dictate and define what is going to be playing on your screens on any given day. So far less tasks, a lot of time saved, lowering your OPEX, increasing return on investment in the system that you have chosen, and of course, eliminating or significantly decreasing the possibility and occurrence of user error. Okay, so into the second question, why use live data to drive your content? So we're now moving from the general topic of automation. Okay, it's a key buzzword that's going around today, talking about artificial intelligence and how we're going to be replacing human beings. That's not really what we're trying to get after here. We're just trying to create a system and provide you with, tools to use automation to your advantage so that you can simply free up time to take on other important tasks within your content management workflows. So automation, I think, speaks for itself. Less error, quicker, time savings, improved accountability. And the second piece to this, the last slide will show before we start getting into some actual examples, is not only why use automation, but more importantly, or as an aside here, why use live data to drive your content? Okay, so these also are fairly self-explanatory, but we'll go through them one by one. The first one, and maybe even most importantly, is data changes faster than your employees can manually make content changes in any CMS. No matter how easy the CMS is to use and how quick and intuitive it is, as you'll see, the Navori system is incredibly intuitive and simple to use. Changes in data, external data sources, external variables, environmental variables, those are changing much faster than any employee you hire can be manually reacting to these situations and making content changes in your CMS. So it's just the idea that data moves faster than humans move. That's really the easiest way to summarize it. So we always strongly suggest, start incorporating some of these data sources and tie them to smart rules to define what is going to play on your screens wherever they are, whatever situation they are being used for. Number two, ensuring a personalized and engaging customer experience. Okay, so part of what you're going to see in the next 2 to 3 minutes, we're going to be moving into some actual examples. And part of what it's going to be based around is ensuring a personalized and engaging customer experience. So the idea is ultimately, let's say you are walking into a retail store, okay, and you see a big screen that is showing advertisements. It could be there's men's clothing, there's women's clothing, there's accessories, all kinds of things. Wouldn't it be nice if when you walked in, the advertisements, let's say, or promotions that were showing on that screen that you happen to stand in front of were personalized to show you only things that we believe you would be most interested in seeing or learning more about? Okay, so if you're a male between the ages of, let's say, 25 and 40, you're not interested in learning about, women's stockings or high heel shoes. Okay, you're more interested in, let's say, neckties, suits, men's casual wear, things along those lines. So the idea of using live data, among other things, is to ensure that personalized and engaging customer experience. We are able to tailor the message to the viewer, okay? Rather than creating long, generic playlists, hoping that the right person is standing in front of the screen when the ad, let's say, that's most relevant to them comes up, we are ensuring it by using a combination of live data sources, content automation, and ultimately a simple and seamless system to ensure that that person, that shopper, let's say in the retail example, is only seeing information advertisements that are most relevant to them. Third point, eliminate assumptions and guesswork. Okay, so it's difficult to predict whether you're in, corporate communications, retail, quick service restaurants. It's difficult to predict who your customers are going to be on any given day. Okay, you can analyze statistics, data. You can get probably somewhat close, but rather than spending all of that time, we recommend, again, using live data and smart rules to automate your content choices. So rather than guessing, let's use the actual real information that we have access to prioritize the content that is most important and relevant to whatever viewers or shoppers or employees we have near any given screen at any given time. The final point, your organization likely has a wealth of important and actionable data already. Why not make use of it? Okay, so part of the idea here again is, your organization, whether you're in retail, you're doing corporate communications, you're doing experiential digital signage, you have important and actionable data, most likely about your shoppers, about your sales figures, about your engagement. So we want to encourage you to simply start using that data and incorporate it into your digital signage system and platform to basically streamline and personalize your customer experience or viewer experience. So in summary, overall, the whole idea here is that we want to simplify your lives as content managers. But by doing so, of course, we're freeing up time, we're increasing return on investment of the system that you are using, and ultimately creating a better experience for your viewers. Better and engaging, of course, because digital signage is all about creating engaging content and experiences that people will ultimately want to view and consume. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to start getting into some simple examples. I'll give you a quick preview of the third slide, which are just some key use cases we've picked out where we think automated data-driven workflows would provide a very big advantage to your organization, company, content managers, and employees. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move this aside for now. We're going to go ahead and get into our first couple of live examples. So I'm going to go ahead and log into the Navori CMS. It is an HTML5 web-based CMS. I happen to be loading it in Google Chrome, which is my favorite web browser, but you're free to use whatever web browser that you so choose. So the first thing that I want to cover is probably the most simple example that we could come up with to start giving you a taste of how we can use live data sources in a very, very simple way to ensure not only engagement, but also ensure that we are automatically displaying the most relevant content at any given moment in time. So I want to call your attention to this playlist here that I've created called Coffee Shop. And all the media that exists in that playlist is right down here at the bottom. Okay, so you'll notice there's a lot of different content. I've got 2 videos at the beginning, and I've got 2 videos on the end. In the middle, I have 4 separate images. We'll consider these our advertisements, okay? And I want you to notice that each one of these has a little gear icon that is showing up next to the image, okay, for both my hot coffee, hot tea, cold smoothie, iced coffee. So the idea here is that we are going to use, for the first example, the outdoor temperature, okay, a live weather feed to dictate which of these advertisements we actually want to prioritize on the screen, okay? So let's open this up and start talking very quickly about how we can simply and quickly create data-driven rules to define what content we want to prioritize and see on the screen based on what the current temperature or weather is outside. So if I double click on one of these images, we're going to move over to our rules engine. And that's what you see right here, okay? So I want you to also pay attention to one other thing. We're going to be talking about 2 different types of content automation. One is the play if, and the other is what we're going to call the trigger. So the play if refers to, well, we're saying we're adding all of these media to our content playlists for today and for the next several weeks, let's say. And I want these pieces of media, these 4, to play only if the rules that we have set up are satisfied by the live data source we are connected to. Okay, so again, it comes back to this idea of time savings and creating a workflow that will deliver only the most relevant advertisements or media to the viewers based on external variables. Now, back into the example, let's open up the first one. And I'm using the current outdoor temperature in New York City to define whether I want this piece of media, this advertisement for hot coffee, to be played as part of my playlist. Okay, so the idea, again, just to go back and forth one more time here, the idea is that when the temperature outside is cold or considered to be chilly, cold, given the season or time of year, we want to prioritize and play back the advertisements for our hot beverages. Okay, so coffee shops today are selling hot beverages, cold beverages, food, all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to say, okay, well, when it's particularly cold outside, I want to prioritize and play the media and advertisements I have that are selling hot beverages. To the opposite, when the temperature is considered seasonably warm, people are more likely coming in for something cold and refreshing. So when the temperature is above a certain value outside, I want to prioritize and allow my advertisements for cold beverages to play. So the idea here, again, is I'm taking all of these ads and I'm simply dropping them into my playlist right now, okay? We're going to publish these to the actual player endpoints that we have. Not to worry, we also have a camera view, so I'll let you see some of this happening in real time on screen. But to come back to the example, we're using the weather to decide which advertisements we want to prioritize. So let's show you the rule creation engine. And again, this is probably the most simple example that I can give. So we go ahead and create a new rule and call it cold outside. So what we're looking at here is basically a single rule that is going to define whether this ad is going to be allowed to play as part of my current content playlist. So the first thing we see is, okay, well, which weather feed are we actually looking to, or which data feed, excuse me, or data source are we actually looking to monitor? In this case, it's New York weather. Just to give you a sense of what that data feed looks like, here it is in our data feed manager. So every 30 minutes, or at the refresh interval of our choice, we are refreshing the live data source, and we see, current conditions, chance of precipitation. I'm going to be focusing on the feels like temperature. So currently outside in New York City, the temperature feels like 44 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's going to be our key data point for this example, okay? So the data is always refreshing with no user intervention, and this value will continue to change throughout the day, throughout the weeks, throughout the months, to simply, of course, show what the current temperature outside is. Now, back to our rules. I'm saying, okay, well, New York weather, that is the feed that I want to monitor. Which column or data point do I most care about? In this case, it is the feels like temperature, where we just saw it was 44 degrees outside. Operator. So this is saying, okay, well, we're monitoring New York weather. We're monitoring the feels like temperature. What is our operator? Okay, how do we want to make decision against that data point? In this case, the feels like temperature. So I'm saying when the feels like temperature in New York is lower than 50 degrees Fahrenheit, I want this to be allowed to play. So we are playing this media if the current temperature outside is lower than 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We can do a quick test to see if that is currently true, which it is. So I know that this is actually going to play as part of my content loop. So if I come back to the actual playlist here, you'll see that I put, let's consider these to be my first two generic advertisements for the coffee shop that will play no matter what. And then right here, I've got 4 play if statements, data-driven content automation. So when the temperature outside is below 50, you're going to see my ads for hot coffee and hot tea. When it is above 50 degrees or warmer out, you're going to see cold smoothie and iced coffee. You're never going to see these two playing back to back with these two because they're both linked to the same set of rules. Okay, so let's go out to a camera feed that we have here in the office. And I'm just going to let this playlist run for you for a couple seconds or a couple minutes, let's say, to see what the screens are actually doing. Okay, so of course this is generic, unbranded content and media, but I'm going to pull this out side by side, and we'll look at it right next to our playlist. So we are at the bottom. We're going to watch the videos play, and this actually brings up an important point. Some of you may be thinking, well, that's great, but what happens if, there's no access to the data source, or the data source is down, or internet is down? That is why we're putting in other media as well, not just our data-driven content, okay? So these 4 videos will always remain the same, and we're letting our data-driven content automation decide which of these advertisements are actually going to play on screen. So I don't have to come into the system and put in things for today, take them out. I'm putting in all possibilities and leaving them behind here in my playlist and letting the outdoor temperature dictate which one of them are going to play. So right now we're at our first play if, which is the hot coffee. That'll play for 7 seconds because, of course, the outdoor temperature dictates it should be playing. Same for this one down here. So this is going to play for another 7 seconds. And then, we actually skipped the 2 advertisements that are related to the temperature outside being warm, and we've jumped right back to the video content at the end of the playlist. So coming back to some of the points that we discussed at the beginning as far as why automate and also why use live data, hopefully it's starting to become a little bit more obvious through these examples. And the idea is simply, let's set up our rules one time, set up our playlist one time with all possibilities, and we simply sit back and let the data decide. Okay, so to steal from a famous infomercial, there was this gentleman that always said, set it and forget it. And that's the idea here. We're trying to create a system and set of workflows where you're not going to have employees logging in every single day or several times a day to make content decisions. We are creating a simple workflow one time. And of course, this is a very sort of basic example, but we're letting the data decide what we want to prioritize on screen. And in this case, the temperature outside is fairly chilly, so we are prioritizing the playback only of the advertisements for the hot beverages and not showing anything with regards to the cold. But to finish the idea, let's say tomorrow the temperature is, it's a very warm day in New York City in the winter, it's 68 degrees outside. Well, I don't have to take any action in my digital signage CMS to prepare for that eventuality because it is already done. So tomorrow when it's 68, you're never going to see my hot coffee or hot tea. You're going to simply see the cold smoothie and iced coffee to try and, in advance, automatically react to the environmental variables. So that's really the first high-level example. And it all happens through this rules-based engine, which I've shown you here before. Okay, so for each ad that is in this particular playlist, I'll choose another one. Let's look at cold smoothie, for example. You see, okay, well, this is when it's hot outside. So we're monitoring New York weather. When the feels like temperature is greater than or equal to 51 degrees, Then I consider it to be seasonably warm, and I want to prioritize the playback of the cold beverage advertisement. Okay, so that's really the basis of what we're going to be discussing today, whether it's play if or conditional trigger. It's using simple content automation with easy to use tools that can be obvious to anyone, regardless of technical knowledge, computer experience, to be able to take simple steps to simplify their lives, decrease the time spent day to day in the given CMS, and ensure that we are showing the most relevant content based on data or environmental variables. Next, we're going to switch gears, but continue along with the live demonstration portion of this particular webinar. And I'm going to go into a slightly different example. Okay, so we're going to talk about, let's say, a retail store. Okay, so you'll notice that, I've got a fairly similar playlist set up here. It's very small, just so we can make sure that everything rotates through very quickly. We're going to publish this to our screens, and let's discuss what we're looking at. Okay, so in the case of a retail store, again, I'm creating a buffer for myself, or a safeguard, by including additional media that is general or generic to the retail store. So this could be, welcome to our store, hope you enjoy your shopping, showing, important news or upcoming promotions, things like that. That would be our generic content. But the actual personalized content, based on actual products we are trying to sell or attention we are trying to get, we're going to be using, again, data-driven content automation using simple rules. So let's go and take a look at this particular piece of media. It's for men's ties. So I page over a couple times and I arrive back at my rules engine. So here we're going to take it a slight step further. Okay, so I'm saying this is a unisex clothing store, for example, and I've got a live data feed. In this case, it's a data feed that I've created that is simulating the output from a camera in the store, or facial recognition camera. Okay, so what it's doing is, anytime that it detects somebody standing directly in front of the screen, the data source automatically updates. So when nobody is there, my data row shows me, nope, no person present, no stats or information about that person. But when somebody is there, the first record in my data source is going to show me, hey, yes, there is a person present. Okay, it shows me the age of that person, or an age range. It shows me their gender. It shows me their mood. So now we're talking about data that is coming from a live sensor or camera within the retail store example. Okay, so I see, okay, well, system automatically detects, hey, there's a person present right now. It's a approximately 37-year-old male. So if I come back to the rules engine, you'll see that is exactly the kind of person that I want to see this particular advertisement. Okay, so here's how we do the rules. You'll notice this time I have 3 rules, and we've done them with an AND operator. Okay, it can always be AND or, but in this case it's AND. So now I'm using 3 data points to dictate if there is a person present, yes. What is their gender? Is it male? In this case, yes. And what is their age? Is it greater than or equal to 25? Okay, perhaps we could have gone slightly lower. I'm going to say 25 and up typically are the ones shopping for neckties. Okay, so again, when building these, we can just do a quick test. I know that currently all of those are true. So let's come back to our playlist. And in this scenario, it's the same as we looked at for the coffee shop. Okay, we are going to play or not play this particular piece of media based on if the person standing in front of the screen satisfies those rules and requirements that we set forth. However, I'm going to remove it from the playlist. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to use it as a data-driven trigger. So earlier, a coffee shop example, we talked about play if. Okay, so play if means I'm adding it to my playlist today and now, but I only want it to play as part of my playlist if and when all of my rules are satisfied. The difference for trigger, and this is something we're going to use more frequently when talking about live data sources like cameras or sensors. Okay, So I don't want the playlist to have to wait for this piece of media to come up. As soon as the camera near this screen detects that there is a person present, it's a male, 25 years or older, I want this to play instantly and immediately, okay? So in this case, we're putting it into our trigger section. So it's not part of the day-to-day playlist. This is the content that's going to be running all day long by itself, uninterrupted. As soon as the camera detects that there's a male standing there that is over 25, this is going to take over and show up on the screen immediately, okay? So I'm going to go out to my camera feed here in just a second again and show you how we're going to go ahead and put this into action. So right away already you see that, well, the only thing playing on my screen right now is the trigger media, okay? So we're going to window things out side by side. I'm going to simulate a live data change, okay? So I'm going to show you a slightly different interface here for just a moment. We're going to call it, actually, we're going to stay in the same place. So I'm going to simulate the changing of the data, okay? The camera detects currently that there is a person standing there that is male over 25. If, just a moment here, I'm going to modify the data right now manually, okay? Normally this is going to be completely automated, but let's say, okay, great. So I'll go into the data. I'm going to simulate, that there is currently no person present, okay? So the system thinks, oh, yep, there's nobody standing in front of the screen. So right away, that media gets dropped from the actual display, and the player goes back to doing exactly what it was doing before, which is running through the basic playlist. Okay, so all day long, we're running through the basic playlist of content, relevant media for the day, for the week, based on, the store. But as soon as the camera that would be sitting right around here detects that, hey, there is a person present, so let's go ahead and actually change the data manually. Again, this is going to be completely automated against a live data source. As soon as the camera detects, oh, person present, okay, so the data just changed automatically. Right away, without having to do anything, that advertisement pops up on the screen, okay? So different from the coffee shop example where we're saying, I'm putting all possibilities in the playlist, and I'm letting the system decide if any of these should be allowed to be played based on the weather outside. The difference here is I'm not putting any of that conditional media inside of my playlist. I'm just letting the player run, do its thing, play whatever it is we want to show on the screen for that given day. But as soon as the data dictates that, hey, there's a person there and it satisfies our requirements for showing, let's say, the men's ties media, then it's going to display immediately on the screen. So that comes back to this idea about, in my earlier slides, we talked about ensuring a personalized and engaging customer experience. That ultimately is the goal, right? For any visual communications, visual media, digital signage, the goal is to drive engagement. I want people to look at my screens and consume the information that I'm trying to put in front of them. So we'll just show a final release here. So let's say, the camera data is automatically changing. Now, nope, that person has walked away. Hopefully they stood there long enough to see, our ties advertisement. As soon as the data changes, we are detecting, no, there's not currently a person present. Automatically, the trigger media gets released from the screen, and the player simply goes back to doing exactly what it was doing before, which is running the playlist that we have specified and scheduled to play indefinitely on screen. Okay, so if we try for a second just to review some of these tasks, or some of these points, that we covered very briefly from the PowerPoint, hopefully you're starting to get a sense of, what exactly I meant or had in mind when I jotted these down. Now that you've seen the example, hopefully you can tell that while, yes, using scenarios like this is going to save employees time. It is going to decrease the possibility and occurrence of user errors. It will give your users this extra time that they're gaining. They have now more time to spend on creating valuable content, to fix issues or errors that pop up, and also increase their productivity simply because they don't have to log into the CMS every single day and make a massive amount of changes for that given day or for their expected in-store traffic, so to speak. Down to the second one, again, The biggest focus always here is ensure a personalized and engaging customer experience. Eliminate assumptions and guesswork. React to actionable data faster than a human being could log in quickly and make changes. So my hope is that, this is really starting to sink in now that we've seen a couple live examples. I do have one or two more that I want to go through. Coming to the final slide, which again is just an overall summary of some of the key use cases where we think data-driven content automation would provide tremendous value. The next one I want to talk about briefly is emergency alerts and warnings, okay? Safety messages, fire alerts, amber alert, things along those lines. So let's come back to the actual CMS interface again and talk about how we would go ahead and make something like that work. So just going to prepare for the next part. Let's publish out to our screens and go through the next example, So we cover, just as a quick summary, play if, using the coffee shop example. Which of these are going to be allowed to play based on the weather outside? Once the rules are set, I can kick back, put my feet up, and let the data decide. In the retail store example, we talked about using a conditional trigger against the camera feed. So all day long, we're running through a very simple playlist of generic in-store media. But as soon as the particular person that we need walks up and is seen by the camera detects who that is. It's a male over a certain age. We instantly play this piece of media as a trigger. As soon as that person walks away, as we saw in the example, the media player dumps that triggered content and simply goes back to doing whatever it was doing before. Okay. Now, for the next example, we're going to do a emergency alert and notification example. Okay. These are very, very popular in pretty much all scenarios. It's just a question of reliable safety communication, whether it's inside of your internal organization, it's in a store, it's in a public place, public center, whatever it might be. We always want to be prepared for any eventuality. So here, for the next example, we're going to stick with the same simple content looping around on our screens. You'll see our example. That's all it's doing, simply looping through the basic content for the day. Now, I want to open up this template. So this is a background image that is being overlaid with actual messaging coming from a third-party system. Okay, so I want to actually show you the data feed or data source. In this case, we're using a completely third-party system. Okay, not built by Navori, not part of the Navori ecosystem. But we're doing this in an effort to show you that you can consume or pull in data and information from any third-party system, whether it's your internal point-of-sale system, it's inventory management data, it's live cameras and sensors. In this case, a third-party emergency notification system. Okay, so anytime there's an alert, it instantly pops up in our data feed or data feed manager. Okay, and this data feed manager, we can connect all sorts of different types of data feeds. Anything that is RSS or XML based, which will cover the great majority of what's out there. Server feeds, Twitter, Facebook, Google Calendar, Microsoft Exchange Calendar, the list goes on. So in this case, I'm simply saying, okay, well, I am monitoring this particular data feed every 5 seconds, let's say. And anytime an alert message comes in, I'm going to use that to not only trigger the associated emergency media, but also populate it with the data that is coming from that feed. So right now, the most recent message, it shows all clear, emergency situation has been resolved. And that's what I'm seeing here in my template, okay? Now, this particular template is not in my playlist, of course, so it's not showing on the screen. So I want to show you how we're going to then trigger. Much like the necktie example, we're creating a piece of media that we're storing here in the background and waiting for it to be called by the appropriate change in data from the data source that we are monitoring. So again, this is an example of a data-driven trigger rather than a play if. Okay, so again, as I did in the camera feed example, I'm going to manually trigger a change in the data. So I'm going to go to that particular third-party tool. We're going to log in, and we're going to go ahead and send a new alert. Okay, so a data feed like I have on screen can be tied to any number of screens, no matter where in the world that they are, and these triggers can also be created in a location-specific way. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to simply trigger a fire alert message from this third-party system. So what's going to happen is in that data feed that I just showed on the screen, instead of showing all clear, it's going to immediately pull up fire alert. Okay, so I'm going to do these side by side so we can get a very clear view of exactly how quickly this is occurring. So we're going to go ahead and send the message. So what's happening is data feed that I just showed you in the Navori data feed manager is changing instantly to now show fire as the title, which is, again, what we were looking for, right? Now you see here, as soon as I hit that button, right away, those alert templates were called into action via the data-driven trigger, and simply will sit there on the screen for as long as that scenario remains true. Okay, so let's go take a look at it one more time here so we can compare side by side. And we said this template we leave behind in our trigger published folder. It's sitting there simply waiting to react to the data-driven scenario that we have programmed. Again, let's take a look at it very quickly. We said, okay, well, we are monitoring the emergency alerts data feed. Let's take another very quick look at it. And you'll see the first record is now fire alert. That was the alert that we just triggered a few seconds ago. So it sits there, and the media says, okay, well, yep, the title in my emergency alert feed contains the word fire. So I'm going to not only play this, I'm going to play it immediately and indefinitely for as long as this remains the case. Okay. Hopefully, if we zoom out here a little bit, you'll see, okay, we'll stay in on the left side. My screens have already changed instantly within seconds of that data source changing to show this message on the screen. Now, when that situation is over, very similarly to when we talked about the male over 25 years old has now walked away from the screen, we want this to go away, right? When the fire alert has been cleared, everything is back to normal, we really want this ultimately to go away. So we go back to the third-party system. We're going to send out the all clear. I hit send message. Right away in behind the scenes, the data feed is updating instantly. And just as quickly, the screen or player that we are linked to has dumped that trigger or alert media and has already gone back to doing whatever it was doing before. Okay, so I removed the necktie example from the trigger folder here a few minutes ago, just so we could only be focused in on this one. But hopefully now you're starting to get the idea where there's nothing stopping me from, let's say, creating. And let's go and get that necktie example. And putting as much content here as I want in trigger published, which is basically sitting there and waiting for it to be called based on the simple automation rules that we have created in the rules engine in the Navori CMS. So these are never going to play until the situation arrives or occurs based on the data we are monitoring to where we actually want these to display. So you could have maybe 25 different things in here, 15 different ads, 2 or 3 different alert templates, all kinds of different stuff. And they're never going to show on the screen until the data situation or scenario that we've created based on, of course, the data feed we're monitoring, and also based on the simple rules that we have set up against this media. These medias are never going to play until all of their particular rules are satisfied. And when that occurs, of course, we'll trigger this one more time here. Let's say fire alert. Right away, the data that I showed you in the Navori Data Feed Manager changes instantly, and the player, again, also reacts instantly. Okay, now you see how quickly that occurred. This, of course, is based on WebSocket communication, so our players can talk very quickly and easily via open lines of communication to the Navori server. And it allows the system and screens, no matter where in the world they are, no matter how many there are, to simply instantly react to changes in data. Okay, so I'm reaching right on about the 45-minute mark. We're going to make sure to leave some time for questions here. But I just want to come back to this final list, and then I'm going to go ahead and pause and open up to questions. So you start to get the idea. Now, when I'm talking about targeted advertisements and increasing engagement and customer experience, we can work with things like, camera feeds, sensors, artificial intelligence, RFID sensors or tags. If you're driving into a fast food restaurant drive-through lane, let's say, the screen is playing, generic advertisements. We want that camera or sensor to detect that there's a car there, and maybe even read your license plate, such that as soon as you arrive at the screen where you're going to place your order, we are showing you relevant media and information and data based on who you are, and basically moving away from just the generic loop that is running all day long when there are no cars there. So we're talking about, other examples: camera feeds, sensors, artificial intelligence, RFID readers, live weather data, point of sale data, inventory data, cap feeds, weather feeds, emergency alert systems. The possibilities are ultimately endless. So I really want to make sure that, what you've taken away and what you're understanding from what I'm trying to show here is that with the right tools, data-driven content automation is actually quite easy. Hopefully you guys have taken note, or you folks, have taken note of the fact that no matter what it is that I'm doing in the platform with regards to creating these simple rules, never was there a screen, a scary CMD-looking window where I had to put in some scripts. There was no programming necessary. In fact, I've done everything out of the single tab of my favorite web browser, mainly just doing simple left clicks, right clicks, drag and drop. So you don't have to be an expert or a programming genius to be able to take advantage of these types of things. So with the right tools, it is actually easy. Data-driven content management ensures also that your audience always sees the content that is most relevant to them. That is of extreme importance. Digital signage loses a lot of its value if you're showing just generic information that most people may or may not really care about. So they're going to just start walking by your screens without ever looking at them. Okay? Again, we're talking about using simple rules and data sources. We're lowering overhead, increasing ROI and viewer engagement. And finally, the ability to instantly trigger content on any display in any location is extremely valuable. Again, coming back to this idea of creating a valuable and personalized user experience. So I've gone a couple of minutes over already. I'm going to pass the floor back to Jason, and I think we can go ahead and open up to some questions. So thank you guys for your time and attention, and let's see if we actually have some questions that came in.
All right, thank you, Jordan. Excellent job. And yep, we're officially opening the floor for questions. So if you're ready for the first one, Jordan, it's what are the security privacy implications of using live cameras as a data source?
Ooh, good question. It's actually a question that comes up a lot when we start talking about things like this, especially since, I haven't mentioned it previously, but Navori is, getting very close to releasing our own computer vision technology, where you can have, facial recognition or person recognition cameras that feed directly into the Navori data feed manager with no integration required. Now, the key point here, and anyone that has read or learned much about privacy and security concerns with regards to cameras like this, is that we are never storing any personally identifiable information, and that is very important. Okay, whether you end up using the Navori solution for computer vision or camera vision in your digital signage workspace, you want to always make sure that you are simply not storing personally identifiable information, the names of people, more detailed information about them. So I believe it really comes down to the fact that as long as you are not actively storing personally identifiable information about any of your employees, shoppers, viewers, whatever they might be, then you're going to be in the clear, and there should be absolutely no concern. The data that's being used is temporary data that really only contains non-personally identifiable data or information. And once that person has walked away from the screen, ultimately that data within a matter of hours is going to be completely removed from the system, never to be used again. So it's really just making sure you're not actively storing personally identifiable information. But thank you for the question. It's a very important one, and something that I think we're going to continue to hear more and more about as folks start using a lot more artificial intelligence, computer vision, business intelligence data to make choices on what to show their customers and employees. Thank you for the question.
Okay, excellent. Our next question is it easy to undo these data-driven rules if you don't like the results?
Absolutely. That's also a great question. So I'm actually going to come back to the CMS here for a quick second and make a very quick example. So another part of the keys to really using these types of data-driven automation scenarios is that you're doing so in a tool that is professional grade and that is simple and intuitive to understand and operate. And that's really what we believe we're delivering here with Navori. So for example, let's say we say, you know what, we've done this, it's been running for a couple of weeks, but today only, we're running special promotions on all hot coffees, teas, iced coffees, and cold smoothies. So you know what, today I want to do away with those rules and I just want to let everything play. So it's going to be pretty much this simple. I double click on each piece of media, come back to our rules engine, which in this case was play if, and I'm simply going to select none and hit save. Right away, you see the little cogwheel, which indicates that there is a conditional data-driven statement against this media, instantly disappears. We go to none, our rules disappear, and the rules are instantly removed from those pieces of media that we have selected. So it's really, really easy to be agile and nimble when using proper tools like the Navori CMS. And the converse, we say, oh, you know what? We changed our mind. We want to start using that stuff again. Well, I don't have to go and recreate the rules every single time. Each rule I create is stored here in my library. I'm going to say, yep, we're going to use cold outside again. I hit save. Here comes the cogwheel. We're now back in action, listening to the weather data to define and decide if and when these pieces of media should play as part of our content playlist and loop. And there it is. So in just maybe all of 30 seconds, we've both removed the rules and added them back to these two particular pieces of media. So thank you for the question.
Okay, moving on. What are some of the drawbacks to using an automated data-driven workflow?
Ooh, wow, these are some good questions. Drawbacks. So, a potential drawback could be, and this is more environmental. Let's say you have, recurring connectivity issues. Okay, of course, to have your media and players reacting to live data, they need to be able to communicate actively with the data sources that we are monitoring or connecting to make these content decisions. So a potential drawback could be, there could be some reliability questions if, of course, your, let's say network infrastructure is unreliable. But the fallback there, the counter to that potential downside is, well, if you notice in every example that I did, whether it was, conditional trigger, standard content playing and then show the media based on what the camera is seeing, or even in the case of the play if, let the data decide if and when any of these should play. So you'll notice that each time I've created or put in place fallback media, so to speak. So the two videos at the beginning of my playlist and the two videos on the end are going to play regardless of whether there is data or no data, whether our rules are matching or anything along those lines. So while what I mentioned or identified as a potential drawback, there are simple strategies, especially in a tool like this CMS, to always protect yourself from things like connectivity issues or unreliable data feeds and data sources. The final point is, and it actually pulls into the question that was asked just previously. Well, let's say I say, okay, well, all the data is down, there's major network outages, things like that. We can't communicate with the data sources. Well, without touching anything, without even logging back into the CMS, I know with 100% certainty that all my other media is going to continue to play on screen, so it'll never be a blank screen. Also, if I so choose to, again, draw back on the previous question, I can very quickly come in here and say, okay, no, we're not using data-driven rules anymore. and we simply one by one remove all 4 of them in less than 30 seconds, and we are now avoiding that altogether. So long answer, pulling on several different topics, but hopefully to the person that asked that question, that gives you a detailed answer, the answer hopefully that you were looking for. So thank you for the question.
Excellent. We have someone who would like you to, if possible, re-explain the difference between trigger and play if.
Okay. I had a feeling that might come up. So we're going through it a little bit quickly. So very important. So both trigger and play if, in terms of the Navori system, are both data-driven content automation scenarios, but they behave a little bit differently. So the play if refers to media that I'm putting in my playlist today and publishing out with rules assigned. So play if means basically, well, play my media if the data-driven rules that I've created are true and or satisfied. So in this case, play this media as part of my playlist if all of this is true. So we're going through the playlist, and we are playing if. The trigger is when my data scenario is true, trigger or play that piece of media now and play it indefinitely for as long as that rule-driven scenario remains true. So I come back to the men's ties example talking about live camera data. So when there's nobody in front of the screen, our player is simply running through the generic media and advertisements. When we're talking trigger, as soon as, at any given moment in time, all 3 of these rules are satisfied and true, we are going to instantly trigger this media to show up on screen right away and leave it playing there for as long as these remain true. So just to sort of flesh out that example one more time, a male that is over 25 years old stands or walks up to this particular screen, the player stops what it's doing right away and starts playing the trigger media whose rules are satisfied by the data coming from that particular camera feed. And the nice part is, as soon as that person walks away, the camera instantly sends us a signal that no, there's currently not a person present. The trigger media gets dropped from the screen, and the player instantly goes back to playing the content it was playing before. So play if is play or don't play as part of my overall playlist. Trigger is when the rules are true, play it immediately and indefinitely for as long as the rules remain true with nothing else coming up on the screen. To the person that asked that, I appreciate it. My apologies for maybe going a little bit quickly through those topics during the webinar, but hopefully that gives you a clear answer to what your question was. So thank you for the question.
Great. Next one is, what happens to my data-driven content when my media players lose internet connectivity or the data source is down?
Good question. So that's, I'm going to answer it. It's kind of a do-over when I talked about potential drawbacks. So, one potential drawback is, you lose connectivity to the data source, the data source goes down, things along those lines. So it all comes back to this simple strategy of not having a playlist that is 100% data-driven, okay? Maybe it is 80% data-driven, 90% data-driven. So in that scenario where you lose connectivity, the players can no longer communicate with that live data source. Until the next refresh of the data occurs, the players will continue to work and operate on the data that they last had, okay? So let's say we're refreshing the data against the weather every 5 minutes. So after 5 minutes of no connectivity, basically what we're going to start doing is we're simply going to start skipping those pieces of media as part of the playlist, okay? So we're not going to not show them based on the data because the data is no longer there or relevant. So that, again, comes back to this idea of using data-driven content automation, but also in conjunction with some fallback media in the event of, a disastrous connectivity scenario, power failures, things along those lines. So we're giving you the opportunity to set up in advance, plan for whatever eventuality might occur, whether from the data or otherwise, and always keeping some other content in there as a fallback should you completely lose connectivity or you have some major failure of the internal infrastructure from which you're running this system or your media players. So thank you for the question, and I hope that that has given you the answer that you were looking for, and that it all made sense. So thank you again.
Cool. So the next question is, what are the types of data feeds that your system accepts?
Excellent question. So we did cover that very, very quickly, but I'll bring it up here again. So when I go to create a new feed in the data feed manager, you'll see we accept anything that is RSS XML based. Okay, that is really one of our key go-tos. And let's say you have things that are in other formats. Via a simple command, something along those lines, it can be easily translated into RSS or XML. We also have server feeds. We cover social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we also have calendar-based feeds for your internal, let's say, Google calendars, Microsoft Exchange calendars, things along those lines. So while the list down here may seem a little bit shorter, the one that you have right here at the top is going to cover the great majority of data-driven scenarios that we are going to encounter to use against our digital signage content and media. So thank you for the question, and hopefully that provides an adequate answer. So thanks again.
Okay, so how long does it take for the data to propagate from the CMS server to the media player endpoints?
That's a good question. Actually, so the data is not actually propagating from the server to the media players, which is actually a big advantage. So what happens is, when I'm showing you data sources in the actual data feed manager here in the Navori CMS, we see it all, and we're using this to create the setup, okay, to add the data feed, to view the data, and so on. But as soon as I publish this down to my players, which happens via a simple single click, it's the media player endpoints themselves that are going to be going to request the data from the actual source, not from the Navori server, okay? So it's a great question, but the answer is no time, because the data isn't actually propagating from the server to the players. We're removing one hop from that equation and just saying, okay, well, it's the actual media players that are going to go out and hit this particular data URL to refresh the data locally, so that each player can have its own local and locally cached data set from which to work. Hopefully that answers the question. And again, thank you for the question. I see also we're a little bit over time here, Jason. I hope that's okay. We're about 3 minutes past. I want to make sure to be respectful of everybody's time.
It's okay with me. We have a lot of engagement, a lot of questions. Okay. So maybe Great. We'll take one more and wrap it up?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Go right ahead.
All right. Would the rule scenarios you demonstrated work for active cameras and sensors?
Absolutely. Great question. So maybe the person that asked that one missed part of the presentation, but that's really, that was one of the biggest ideas we had in mind when putting together this powerful yet easy to use rules engine. Okay, so right here at the top of the list on my welcome slide, we talk about computer vision, people identification, attendance, qualification. So while we came out with the rules engine first, one of the reasons why we did that was because in the very near future, Navori is going to be releasing a new product called Aquagi, which is going to be our take on computer vision, people detection, using cameras that will essentially have their video instantly analyzed by the Navori Aquagi system, fed instantly into the data feed manager so that your media can take action based on the rules we program against that data. So it's a bit of a long-winded, wordy answer, but the short story is that's really what we had in mind when we started to put this system and rules engine together. So it started with using simple data feeds, things like point of sale data, attendance information, sensors, weather information, weather data. But where we're driving towards is really using these rules engines against live camera views, live cameras inside of stores, companies, public spaces, whatever it might be. So long answer, the short version of the answer is yes, absolutely 100%. And not only do we have this rules engine available today, in the near future, we're going to be releasing, Navori will be releasing the total other side of the equation, which is a standalone computer vision camera analytics system developed by Navori that, of course, is built to work perfectly in conjunction with the main CMS and rules engine that we've been exploring here today. And that's what has been on this screen here. So thank you for the question, and hopefully that gives you an adequate answer.
All right, fantastic. And with that, we will wrap it up. Thanks to everyone for sticking with us, and great job, Jordan. And unless there's anything else you'd like to add, I will just say that once more time that the full recording of today's webinar will be available on Digital Signage Connection probably within 2 business days, so check back Friday there. And thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.
Okay, thanks, Jason, and explanation. Also, thanks to all the attendees. Really appreciate having the opportunity to present to you all. Hopefully, folks have learned a little bit. And of course, as we have on screen, if you ever need to learn more, or interested in finding out more about Navori and the applications discussed today, feel free to reach out to us. Also, feel free, if you're going to be in Vegas for DSE at the end of March, feel free to come by our booth, say hi. I'll be there. Be more than happy to go through some of these examples with you live and do some hands-on demonstrations at the show. So thanks again, everybody, and looking forward to hopefully seeing or speaking with each and every one of you sometime here in the near future. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you. All right.
Bye, everybody.